Hello, my name is Travis Knapp. I'm going to be your CFII today, and we're going to be talking about the pitot system. And so this is really important because about half of the information that we consume from our instruments is from the pitot system. So one way to also highlight the importance of this is to discuss a case study. Bergen Air, which crashed in the 90s, was a 757, and their pitot system became clogged. Their pitot port was clogged, and therefore the pilots became confused. They thought they were overspeeding the aircraft and ultimately stalled the airplane, and everybody died, about 190 people. So very unfortunate, but it just highlights how important it is to understand these systems and to know how they work. On conclusion of this, we will do a post-assessment. So I'm going to give you an oral examination, then also just have you draw the pitot system that we have right in front of us. So just pay close attention to that because I will be checking your understanding of it. All right, so here's our pitot system. As you can see, it's comprised of a few things. So right here, this is our pitot tube. So ram air comes in from here. This is mounted towards the front of our aircraft. And so the positive air pressure of how fast we're flying is put into this. And as you can see, this is only piped into the airspeed indicator, which makes sense. Additionally, we have the static port, which is piped to all three instruments. And that just gives you essentially the pressure outside of the airplane. So as you climb, there's going to be less pressure, and so that's what it will be detecting. And then an alternate static source. Also, sometimes people say you can break your VSI to get an alternate static source. So we'll briefly go through each one of these instruments. All right, starting with the altimeter. So the altimeter lets us know how high we are. And so based on the pressure of the day, because if you leave your airplane on the ground overnight, this altimeter will actually read differently because as isobars move over whatever terrain your airplane's on, it will change the pressure outside. The altimeter senses the pressure through the static port, and as you climb, less pressure is exerted on that static port, and the less pressure, then there's this thing called an aneroid wafer. Just think of this as this is just a closed system, and so think about like a water bottle. You put it underwater, it compresses it. It's a similar idea here, except the opposite direction. And so as you climb, this aneroid wafer is going to expand and get bigger and then move these gears, indicating a climb. And so we're giving an altimeter setting that corrects for those non-standard pressures that I discussed earlier. One error here is that if the static port freezes, then the altimeter will no longer work, and it will read the altimeter setting that the altimeter froze at, that the static port froze at. And then that makes sense because whatever pressure was being exerted on the static port is then going to be that constant pressure because there's no way for that to leave or come other than the static port. All right, next we'll discuss our vertical speed indicator. So this indicates our rate of ascent or descent, and this only works off the static port. And so you see the static port is, it feeds into this case, and then there's a thing called a calibrated leak. And so what this does is that it lets a little bit of air out, and so it's comparing through this diaphragm the pressure that just was to the pressure that is. And so essentially, if you're climbing, you're losing pressure at the static port, and so the calibrated leak is going to let some of that air out, which is then going to actuate all these mechanisms inside of the diaphragm, then indicating your vertical speed. Of note, if the static port freezes, the VSI will go to 0, which makes sense because that calibrated leak it will equalize inside the vertical speed indicator, and so will no longer show a change. All right, and lastly, we have our airspeed indicator. We have ram air coming through the pitot tube that presses up against this diaphragm, and the other side of this diaphragm is static air. So it's comparing the pitot tube air, which is our ram air, how fast we're going through the air, to the static pressure, so how high we are. And through that differential, it can actuate these mechanisms that will then give us our airspeed. Of note, indicated airspeed is different than true airspeed, so the higher you go, true airspeed will be higher than your indicated airspeed. So for errors here, if both the tip of the pitot tube and the drain clog, that is going to make the airspeed indicator act as an altimeter. So if we climb, the airspeed will go up, and if we descend, the airspeed will go down. If only the tip is closed, then we are going to just see an indication of 0. And then if the static port is closed, it's going to be unreliable, and then you will see these errors here. So if you climb, the airspeed is going to descend, and then if you descend, the airspeed is going to increase. And here are my references taken from the PHAC and the Instrument Flying Handbook.